Okay, let's get started animating the logo. By now, you've been working in Photoshop a little bit, and hopefully you've got things together. So let's go ahead and look first at what the final logo is going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to press the 0 key on the number pad to RAM preview the timeline. You can also press the little arrow key right up here to RAM preview. Remember, you can't use the space bar or the play button to RAM preview. And here we go. Okay, that's it. So let's go ahead and get started animating this thing. You'll notice that we have an animated version of the logo here so that you can always check in and see if you've done it right. Let's see, we'll just scrub through here and that's what it looks like. But we're going to be working first on the not animated version, logo not animated. And I want to call your attention to the audio track down here at the bottom. You're going to need to click on the speaker icon to be able to hear the audio track. And notice also that we have these markers set up down here on the audio track. These are going to correspond to the hits or accents in the music. So if we were to scrub the timeline, we can hold the command key or control on the PC and we can scrub through the timeline. There's one. And so there's all the various different hits in the music right there. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is move to 24 frames in the timeline. So we're going to go right here and click on the time code and press 24. Type 24, that is. And you'll notice, just like we had hoped, we've got a marker set up in that very position. Now, so what we're going to do is animate scale here. So I'm going to press S on the keyboard for scale. And I'm going to click on the stopwatch icon for that. And we're going to move now to frame 19. Frame 19. And so that's, 5 frames back. And we're going to set the scale to 0. Okay, so now that one's going to animate in like so. We're going to move to the next one. And let's see, that's going to be D shadow. So we're working our way up from the bottom here. Okay. Now for D shadow, we're going to work on position. So P for position, type P for position on the keyboard. Set a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch. Then we're going to back up 5 frames. I'm going to use the page up button on the keyboard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to go 5 frames backwards. And we're going to take this element and we're going to pull it off in the direction it seems to want to come from, which is over in here. Okay, good on that one. Let's go to the T bottom shadow, and that's going to be the next one we're going to animate, which I believe is right there. And we're going to, again, animate position, P for position. We're going to click on the stopwatch to set a keyframe. We're going to back up 5 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, that's the page up button on the keyboard. If you've got a full keyboard, it's in between the letter keys and the number keys, or the keypad, I should say. And so we're going to take this element and we're going to drag it off sort of in the same basic direction, just a little bit down instead. Okay. The next one we're going to work on is the T bottom. That's this guy right here. Okay, so we're going to move forward to, I believe, that mark right there. And we're going to go P for position, set a keyframe, back up 5 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to pull this one off kind of, I don't know, looks like it needs to go in this direction here. Maybe we'll go down a little bit. I don't know. It's up to you how you want it to animate. And finally, we'll go to the T top right here. We'll move to our next mark. And we're going to go P for position. We're going to set a keyframe. Notice that we're always going from the parked position and backing up in time. 5 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to take this guy and we're going to drag it off in this direction right here. And finally, the D face, which should be at that point in the timeline right there. Again, P for position. And click the stopwatch. And We'll back up 5 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll pull this guy off in the direction he seems to want to come from, right there. And now we have our final bit. So let's go ahead and render it out. We'll see how it looks and sounds. Very nice. That piece is completely animated like it's supposed to be, and let's move on now. So we're going to go to Project 1B Main Comp Not Animated. Okay, and what you're going to see here, I'm going to roll my mouse back a couple of clicks so that we can see this in all its glory. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and hide all of these guides. In order to do so, I'm just going to click Command semicolon, and that will make them go away for us. Okay, so I want you to call your attention to this really quick. We have this special looking icon right here. Logo not animated. Guess what? That's the one we just animated right here. So what I hope you recognize is that we can put comps inside of other comps. How about that? That's called precomposing or nesting. And so we've nested this comp inside of the main comp, and we're going to continue to animate this guy. Okay, so if you're following along with me in the instructions, we're on animating the remaining elements, and this is number 2. So it's telling us to move to 305 in the timeline. So I'm going to go to 305. And we're going to click on the Logo Not Animated layer and press P for position. Now we're going to hold Shift and press R and S. And now we can see position, scale, and rotation for this particular layer. We're going to animate all of these guys, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, set keyframes for scale and rotation. So we're going to click on the little stopwatches here to set keyframes. And now we're going to move to 404 in the timeline, 404. And we're going to go ahead and set the scale to 40%. Scale to 40%, okay? In order to smooth out this motion a little bit, what we're going to do is right-click and choose Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. I realize that that's pretty much off of your screen there. The keyboard shortcut for this is F9 on the keyboard, and that's Mac and PC, the same one. And then this will smooth out the motion. This will make it seem a little more natural and smooth. Okay. Now we're going to go to 5 seconds in the timeline, and we're going to click the stopwatch for position. Okay, this is where we're going to set the position on this. We're going to move to 5:15. And this is one where I've gone ahead and given you the exact numbers. This just helps us to sort of this item, which is going to get really big, to go off in the right direction. And the direction we want it to go here is minus 5230. Seems like an awfully big number, and you can see it zing off in that direction there. But don't worry, because we're also going to set the scale up to 8,900%. 8,900, it's just huge. But what this does for us is it sends it off in the direction of the it's gonna end up with this thing off in the black. And while we're here, we need to go ahead and set the rotation to 5x, 5 times. Now let me explain what this thing does right here. If I set this to 5x, that means it's going to rotate 5 full times. Now, you have to be careful about this, because this one is labeled in degrees. The second part of the equation here is labeled in degrees. So how many degrees in a circle? 360, right? So you have to be careful. If you're going to rotate something 30 degrees or whatever, don't type it into here, because you're going to get a 30 times rotation. So that's not what we want in this case. We want this thing to rotate 5 full times at 0 degrees, 5 full revolutions. Now, the thing I want to point out to you here is this. As this thing starts to get bigger for us, I want you to recognize that you know, the edges just look horrible. This is terrible. And the reason is I kind of sabotaged you in this project. The problem here is that this object is a bitmap object. In fact, everything you import from Photoshop is going to be in bitmap form. What does that mean? Well, it means it's made up of pixels. And depending on how large you have created this object, however many pixels it has, that's how many pixels it has. Now, in this particular case, we didn't make this item very large, and so as we scale it forward, particularly when we scale it really, really large, like we have, 8,900%, well, goodness gracious, we're going to see those individual pixels magnified to a huge amount. So what do we do about this problem? Well, in the future, the way that you're going to do this is if you know you're going to be scaling something up, you'll go ahead and create it as a vector object instead. Vector objects are made up of math, and so no matter how big you scale a vector object, it's always going to remain crisp and clean and pretty. So vector versus bitmap. Vector's made up of math. Bitmap, those images are made up of pixels. All right, so what do we do in this case? We can't go back and recreate it, so instead what we're going to do is we're going to add an effect. We're going to add some blur to this. So what I want you to do is go over here to the Effects and Presets window and type in CC Force, and I don't have to type too many letters into this search bar before I see the effect that I want. I'm going to go ahead and drag that on to our logo not animated layer. And we're going to make a couple of changes up here. We're going to set the motion blur samples to 40 and the shutter angle to 500. Okay, and now you can see that that's really taking care of the jaggies that we're seeing in this element. Now we have something else to do here. If we were to preview this, we would see that the scale motion just doesn't seem to have the impact we were hoping. We're just hoping that it would really just fly out and sort of slam into the camera. But it's really not doing that. And the reason is this. We've applied linear motion to this. Okay, it's scaling. Yes, I know these are not linear keyframes. These are easy ease keyframes, but the motion is still happening more or less in a linear fashion. By that I mean that as it comes towards the camera, it's just scaling up in a linear fashion. But our human perception is that as objects move closer to us, they appear to be moving faster, and objects that are further away seem to be moving slower. That's why airplanes seem to be almost standing still in the sky, even though we know they're going 500 miles an hour. And you can prove this to yourself by driving in the car and looking at an object that's close to you and watching how fast it flies by the car versus something that's off in the distance, and you can see how slowly that object seems to move. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to draw a box around these two keyframes right here, and we're going to go to right click. Whoops, I got too many keyframes chosen. Got to be careful there. We're going to select those two, only two keyframes, and right click and choose Keyframe Assistant, and I know this is off of the screen for you, exponential scale. Exponential scale. And what that's going to do is add a ton of keyframes that as this moves further and further and further towards the camera, it's making greater and greater leaps in terms of the motion that's happening, the amount of scale, so that it appears to be moving faster as it moves towards the camera. So now on step number 9, let's go ahead and get rid of this guy right here, and we're going to work on the text layer. We're actually very close on this. So we're going to go to the text layer, and we're going to go to 221 in the timeline, 221. And we're going to animate rotations, so we'll type the letter R. And we'll go ahead and click the stopwatch for rotation. Now we'll move to 515, 515, and we're going to set the rotation at 45 degrees. 0 times 45. So you can see there's just a slow rotation that's going on there. Okay. All right, so with the text still selected, we're going to go to 305 in the timeline. And we're going to set a keyframe for scale. S for scale. Click on the stopwatch. And once we've got the keyframe set, we're going to move to 227. 227. And set the scale to 250%. So we're going to see that this thing flies in. Now you may catch me on this and say, hey, well, hold on a second, but this is going to get really jaggy. And indeed you're right, it does actually look really jaggy as we get it towards the camera. You can see it there, but it happens so fast we're not going to worry about this one. It's not going to kill us in this case. So let's move on now to the sunburst layer. And so we're going to skip down. We're not going to do anything to spotlight, and we're going to go to sunburst. And we're going to type S for scale, and we're going to hold shift and type R so we can see both scale and rotation. So we're going to go to 227 in the timeline, 227, and we're going to click both stopwatches for scale and rotation so we can set some keyframes there. Now let's go to 515, 515. And we're going to set the scale to 125%. That's about the biggest we can go before we start to see that jaggy problem that we talked about earlier. I'm also going to set the rotation to 20 degrees. 20 degrees, just a little bit of rotation. The last thing we need to do is set up an iris wipe on this layer. And so what we need to do is go up here to Effects and Presets and type in Iris. And we'll see, down here, Transition, Iris Wipe. So let's drag that down onto the sunburst layer, okay? Now if we look over in the effect controls, we're going to make a couple of changes to this. We're going to set the number of iris points to 32. And we're going to set the amount of feather to 1000. And we're also going to go ahead and set a keyframe for radius, outer radius, and we're going to set that number to 2000. Now we're going to move to 305 in the timeline, 305, and we're going to set the outer radius to 0. And so what's going to happen here is we can see that iris wipe is coming in, and it's coming in with a lot of feather. Okay? And there is the finished product for us. We can render it out. We've got the audio turned on here, so all we have to do is press the 0 key on the number pad, and it will render that out and play for us. Okay, that's it. Now at that point where the logo just flies out to the camera, that's a point where we'll have a transition and we'll move on to the content of the demo reel. So obviously I don't want you to do mine for this. You're going to do your own thing, but this is what I hope that you will do for your own video. I want you to find a piece of music that you can use and animate your own logo and create a compelling open for your demo reel. So go forth and have fun, and let me know if you have any questions.